I-34F had a brief affair with my superior at work 4 years ago. It lasted for 2 weeks, and during that time, we had sex almost every day, and some days were unprotected. I knew it was wrong from the start, but I don't know what I was thinking. I was blinded by lust, by limerence. I was out of control. My superior was at least 45 at the time, with a beer belly, a wife and 2 kids, but he was a beast on bed. Something that my loving husband lacked in every which way comparatively. Looking back, I regret everything and wish I could take it back. After 2 weeks of this, the guilt became too much, and I ended things. I also left the job shortly after and tried to move on. My husband and I were happy. Not long after the affair ended, I found out I was pregnant. At that point, I was consumed by guilt and uncertainty. I became hyper-focused on my husband, both emotionally and physically. I tried to reconnect in any way I could. Even doing things on bed with him I had never been comfortable doing before. I guess I wanted to overwrite everything I did with XAP by doing the same with my husband. The whole time I was haunted by a nagging doubt. Was this child really my husband's? I buried those doubts deep and decided to move forward, putting all my energy into being a good wife and mother. When our son was born, I prayed he'd look like my husband. But the older he got, the more I couldn't help but notice that he didn't resemble my husband at all. I tried not to dwell on it and convince myself that everything was fine. But there were moments when I'd wake up in the morning and would be jolted out of my skin because my sleeping son's face resembled my XAP so much. But I brushed those thoughts away, thinking they were my imaginations. I've always kept a personal journal on my phone in cloud, since way before my affair. Recently, I got a new phone and downloaded the app again. Somehow, my husband saw me downloading it or something that tipped him off. He managed to read some of my newer entries about my son's resemblance to my XAP and grilled me about it. He asked if I was ever forced into it by my superior. I could see how much he wanted me to say I was, but I couldn't lie. I told him the truth, that it wasn't forced, that it was something I had chosen to do. The moment those words left my mouth, I saw something break inside him. He turned and walked away from me, and I knew I just destroyed everything we had. A few hours later, he came back and wanted to talk again. I told him about my doubts when I discovered my pregnancy, but reassured him that our son was his. He said I couldn't know that for sure, and I wouldn't journal my doubts if I was sure. He has obviously asked for a paternity test, and though I'm deeply hurt, I can understand why he needs that reassurance. How could he trust me after what I had done, after I had kept it hidden for so long? I'm terrified. I have bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I do not know what I will do if the paternity test confirms my suspicions. He scheduled the paternity test, and the anxiety is killing me. I keep thinking about how everything will change if the worst happens. I don't know what to do. I half expected him to say that no matter what the DNA of our child is, our child will always be his. But instead, he's distanced himself from our child. He's refusing to interact with our son, and I can't bear to see my son being sad all the time. I can't believe how much damage I've caused, and I'm kicking myself for not using protection when it happened. That way, I'll at least know with certainty that our child is truly ours. How do I get through this? And what can I do to support my husband through this, regardless of the outcome? I'm devastated, and I want the reassurance that my family will be safe. Update 1. For those who read my last post, my husband has now submitted for the paternity test, and the results are due next week. I'm terrified. Every day feels like a countdown to either the end of my marriage or the start of a long and painful journey of trying to rebuild trust. Since he found out, my husband moved out to his parents' place. He barely interacts with our son anymore, which hurts me deeply. I know he's trying to protect himself in case it's the worst, but it's so hard to see him pulling away like this. It feels like he's already written off our child, and a part of me feels it's shallow of him to disconnect so quickly. He raised our son for 3 years. Why would all of his feelings towards our son change over DNA? He came over yesterday and we finally had a long, painful talk. I told him everything, the fears, the doubts, the regrets I've had bottled up. I told him that I'm not the person who made those terrible choices years ago, but I could see it in his eyes the more I explained, the more real it all became for him. It's like he had been in shock since he first found out, and now the reality is truly sinking in. I'm really scared. I know in my heart that I'm not the person I was back then, and I desperately want a chance to heal and keep our family together. I feel like I'm losing everything: my husband, my family, my stability. The burden of all these secrets is partially lifted now that he knows the full story, but I fear we've got a long road of sleepless nights and depression ahead. I just wish he could see how much I want to fix this, to heal, to keep our family intact. I'm trying to hold on to hope, but I feel like I'm drowning in guilt and uncertainty. He's such a wonderful person, and I hate that I've put him in this position. I pray he'll see that I'm a different person now, but I'm bracing myself for whatever comes next. Any advice or encouragement would mean a lot right now. Update 2. My circumstances have deteriorated completely. The paternity test results came back, and my worst fear has been confirmed. My son is not my husband's. My husband is beyond furious. He's told me he's moving back into the house tomorrow and that I need to take our child and get out. He doesn't want us there anymore. I never expected he'd react so fast. He's not giving me any breathing room. I'm baffled he can just turn off his feelings like that for our son. He raised our son for years, believing he was his own. Why would a DNA test change everything so drastically? Are all men like this? Do all men not care for their children for who they're as people, but only as a symbol of their genetics? I even told him that he's being shallow for reacting this way, but he and his family blew up on me and told me I have no right to judge his response after everything I've done. He hates me, and now it feels like my child hates me too. I know he's too young to realize the mess I created for him, but for some reason he seems angry at me. He thinks I'm the reason Dad isn't home. What's even worse is that my husband told my son outright that he's not his son, which broke my heart. He wants a divorce and is insisting I take full custody and get AP to claim paternity so he won't have to pay child support. He said he'd not pay child support even if his life depended upon it. He's pulled him out of their private daycare and given a notice. On top of everything else, I now have to find a new nursery for him. I'd certainly not be able to afford the current one on my own salary. He's also canceled everything he was paying for, from swimming lessons to my gym membership, and told me I'm lucky he's not asking for the money back. I don't work a lot of hours, so now I'm in a position where I need to take up a lot more hours just to make ends meet. I don't know how I'm going to support myself and our son on my own. I told him he was being cruel for turning his back on the son he raised all these years. How could he just switch off his feelings like that? But that only seemed to make things worse. He called me names and told me so many violent things. I want to hire a lawyer, but I don't have the funds for that right now, and I'm not sure whether I will ever be able to. I feel so completely alone in this. Help me understand the course of the most desirable actions for me and my child. Final update. I had to move out with my child. My husband was serious about me and our son leaving, and now we're in a motel. He's pushing for an uncontested divorce with no alimony and no share of any assets from him. I'm stuck trying to figure out if that's the best route for me and my son, because going forward, I think having as much money would be in our best interest since I'm suddenly becoming a single mom. So I haven't given him my word on that. On top of that, he's also contesting paternity to have his name removed from our son's birth certificate. I'm trying to stay hopeful though, because I have done some research and apparently the time allowed to contest paternity is 3 years in my state. Since our child is already over 3 years old, I'm hoping that he won't be able to make that change. I haven't been able to hire a lawyer yet due to financial constraints, but I'm looking into it so I could get the best outcome. Part of me is feeling petty and almost wants him to be stuck paying child support, even if he doesn't want anything to do with our son. He raised him for over 3 years believing he was his, so why should he get to just walk away without any responsibility? He doesn't want our son, but having to pay to raise him for the next 15 years sounds like justified comeuppance. If anyone has advice, especially on how to handle the legal side without a lot of money, I'd appreciate it.